This is the June 28th, 2022 patch notes preview. We've got access to it early because they're going to allow us to change our stuff beforehand. But yeah, the patch isn't out yet. However, I'm going to be going over the full patch notes, talk about the changes and what they may mean for us. And I'll give a quick little TLDR before I go through the entire thing because you may not care about every specific thing. So let's go over the TLDR right now. So first of all, the crit chance of all builds is going to be increased by buffing Fury in PvE from 20% to 25%. They're also going to make a lot of power trait lines like Air in Elementalist, Dueling in Mesmer, Crit Strikes as a Thief, Arms as a Warrior, Firearms as an NG. Just give more precision or crit chance so that essentially they want 100% of your crit chance to be accessible without relying on other classes giving you buffs. And you'll see later on that they're actually removing those buffs as well. So they're removing unique class-specific party buffs like banners, spirits, and like pinpoint precision on engineer that gives condition damage, or spotter on ranger. And that is going to reduce the upper limit of what your buff potential and modifiers can be, but they're also raising the lower limit of making Fury a lot more accessible and buffing Fury and increasing the crit chance overall on those power builds. So you don't have to change your build between game modes. Like if you want to do fractals, you actually have a different precision than if you do raids. They're also changing the Omni Potion so that you don't have that issue where you need to optimize differently for that than another game mode. So those are all good. By the way, check out my one build for all game mode series if you also don't like to swap your build between game modes. And yeah, that's pretty much the general stuff that they're changing. For Elementalist, they're going to nerf Earth Shield, which has been a very powerful utility in the PvP game mode. So they're only nerfing it in PvP. The staff weapon set is getting some buffs for a lot of the water skills. So support water staff builds are getting buffed. And then Tempest is going to get more access to boons for its party, which is going to be good for PvE. It's going to get access to Alacrity, but that could also be good for some PvP builds, potentially. Then you will see the Engineer is getting rifle buffs, which is nice because that's always a fun weapon to go against, but it's also a very fun weapon to play as. And you'll see there's a lot of Mechanist changes to the quality of life and some nerfs as well, because Mechanist is one of the higher performing classes in PvE right now. And then for Guardian, there's going to be some Aegis and Valor synergy where you've got more protection uptime. They're changing Aegis back to the Mantra of Solace for Firebrand in PvP and World versus World, because the Aegis was very powerful there, but too powerful in PvE. So in PvE, you still don't have Aegis on that. And then they're going to be doing some slight nerfs to Condi, like Firebrand builds, because the Firebrand build has just been overperforming for quite some time now. And then they're going to be doing Signet changes, which are going to make them a little bit more usable for Guardian Signets. For Mesmer, they're going to be shifting away from Condi Virtuoso into a more Power Virtuoso kind of playstyle. And Chronomancers are going to get Alacrity on their wells again. And there's going to be easier boon sharing in Chronomancer, whether it is through Alacrity or through Quickness. Necromancers are going to have more support options through the Warhorn and the Blood Magic trait line. They're going to get some decent nerfs to their Death Perception trait, which I think was a huge reason why Reaper was actually one of the most accessible builds in the game. And while it's a good thing for Reaper to be a good class for new players, I think it was too good and it prevented people from moving out to the other classes. We want to have, diversification of the classes. So I think Reaper is getting nerfed on crit chance while everything else is kind of getting buffed on crit chance. And then you've got the Harbinger Elite is getting reduced from 25 to 10 in PvP. So you're going to see some nerfs to the Harbinger, but not really as many as we potentially would hope. Then you'll see the Ranger's spirits are getting alacrity when you have the nature magic trait, and the skirmishing trait line is getting buffs to the crit chance and fury application, which is going to make it a little bit more viable option. And druid is getting more support options in more than one game mode, which is going to make it more viable as one of your choices to support your team. Then we're going to have the Revenant. Revenant is going to get a rework to the Ventari stance and the Salvation trait line, which is going to make it a lot more viable as a support. Then you're going to see that the Revenant also has access to quickness through the Herald specialization, and there's going to be some slight nerfs to Vindicator in PvP because it's one of the most overpowered builds right now due to its high sustain that also comes with its damage. Then there is the Thief, which is getting a Shadow Arts rework to make it less of a stay in stealth idea and more about going in and out of stealth, which I've been asking for a long time. So here we are. This is it. This is the changes I've been asking for. And Critical Strikes is getting a small buff to the Fury and Crit Chance access, which is kind of small, but it's actually really good for a lot of different game modes, because usually when you want to play the Crit Strikes trait line, you want to have Fury all the time, but a lot of the traits were kind of reliant on thresholds, so those are no longer there. You can just get Fury from critting and Crit Strikes without taking the Grandmaster there. And then there's going to be slight Spectre nerfs to their sustain, because just porting around was giving you a lot of sustain as a Spectre, so that's been nerfed. Now, finally, Warrior is going to get Banner quickness and Longbow buffs, and Bladesworn utilities are being reworked. And there's going to be more support options through the Warhorn and the Tactics trait line. So that's also available in World v World and PvP. There's going to be higher coefficients on the healing from shouts. So that's pretty much the whole TLDR of the patch notes, but I'm going to go over the entire thing in depth right now. So we're going to read it from the start. So let's start out with the Rune of the Sanctuary. This is going to now give 10% instead of 20% of the healing you receive as barrier, but it's now going to be affected by healing over time effects like regeneration or passive signets. For example, like the Mechanist build that had barrier, give it alacrity. That's going to give a lot more permanent alacrity to it, but they've already nerfed that in PvP, so there's a 4-second internal cooldown on that trait. But in World vs. World and PvE, you can get that very easily without requiring the Alchemy trait line. So that can be pretty interesting, the Sanctuary Rune with Mechanist. The Mist Defensive Potion, we've just talked about that, is no longer going to give precision, it's going to give vitality. So that's going to make that's going to nerf fractals, right? There's less power creep in fractals, but it's going to make it so that players who are looking to optimize between those two modes essentially don't have to worry about changing their build between raids and fractals, which I think they'll appreciate more so when they are not changing everything, because there is that one quote: players will optimize the fun out of the game. If you're trying to optimize your build all the time, you're not playing the game and you're not having fun. But if you require that optimization, you're going to do it anyways. So I think it's a good change. And then Fury, of course, 20 to 25% in PvE only. And pets like mechs and ranger pets will now get their skills reset by Adrenal Mushrooms and Mistlock Singularities. Now, Elementalist. Let's start out with the LE, because that's the first one. The Fiery Greatsword is getting a nerf, actually. The skill cap used to be 10 on the Fiery Greatsword, but now it's 5. That was mostly useful in World vs. World, where you'd be hitting like 10 players, but you don't really hit that many players in most situations anyways. So the Fiery Greatsword, is only going to be hitting 5 targets now with the 5 skill. So that is a slight nerf, but the tooltips are being changed to indicate that what they actually do. By the way, this isn't the new patch, so these tooltips are not going to show you what they actually are. The patch notes are what they actually are. So look to the right for the actual thing, look to the left for a little bit of a visualization. And on top of that, the Earth Shield, right, the Stone Sheath, with just the 2 skill, is the block. That's getting an increased recharge. And the 3 skill, which is a leap that gives you magnetic aura, is also getting an increased recharge. Only in PvP, because that's where it is the strongest, seeing the most play. Then you've got the air trait line. So this is getting buffs. So the Zephyr Speed is going to give you 5% crit chance while attuned to air. Then you've got Raging Storm, which is this trait. It'll give the Fury to nearby allies as well. And that's on an internal of 8 seconds now. So you're going to get less Fury from this trait in situations where you need this as your only Fury source, but it's going to give it to allies. So it's better in like team play, not so good when you're solo by yourself. Then for the staff, so staff is getting buffs to the water skills. I'm going to look at the staff here. So the staff Lightning Surge, which is the air 2, that's going to get a little bit more damage in PvP and World vs. World. All of these changes to staff are in PvP and World vs. World. So the 2 skill is going to do a little bit more damage. It's this little shock attack. And then the Ice Spike is going to do more damage. That's a 2 that falls down. And then Geyser is going to heal for more. Frozen Ground is going to have a reduced cooldown. And Healing Rain is going to cleanse 2 conditions, which it used to do back in the day, but it was nerfed. So it's going to cleanse 2 conditions per pulse now, which is pretty good for like support staff builds. Now for Weaver, you have the elemental reinforcements here. Refreshment. That's now going to affect up to 5 allies in 360 range of you. So Weavers are not that selfish anymore. They can now provide barrier to their allies. So usually in like PV, this is in all game modes, but in PvP you used to think of Weaver as like a side noder. Maybe it can be a team fighter with this because it can support its allies a little bit more. Also in like raids, why would you take a Weaver? Because it only does DPS. Well, now it can give some barrier to its allies, which is not bad. So finally is the Tempest, which is going to get some changes here to the Lucid Singularity trait. Lucid Singularity is this trait, which has almost never seen play, I would say. But now it's being reworked to apply Alacrity when successfully completing an overload. The duration is 6 seconds with a radius of 360. So you can essentially do an overload every 5 seconds because you're not going to have the Transcendent Tempest thing. So it's not going to reduce the singularity, right? So when you change your attunement, it's a 5-second cooldown before you can start casting your overload. With Alacrity and Quickness, it'll obviously be lower, and Quickness will make the 4-second cast faster. So essentially without any boon uptime, you can have almost pretty permanent Alacrity uptime from this trait. Obviously, you'll want to have some boon duration, and you'll have more access to using overloads if you can have that Alacrity already. So essentially, support Tempest builds have the potential to give Alacrity, and in PvP, I think this could be a potentially good trait, but it's got some good competition, so we'll see. Maybe like a side noder or maybe a World v World roaming build could use this, but we'll see. And then for Catalyst, we have the Deploy Jade Sphere, which was one of the heaviest damaging abilities in PvE, is now going to apply easier access to the boons by having a wider radius. And it's going to, instead of giving Quickness, the air one is going to give Fury. So it will still provide Quickness in PvP and World vs. World, but it no longer does so in PvE. This is a little bit weird, but when you look at the deployed Jade Sphere over here, its damage coefficient is being reduced because that's one of the things that did a lot of damage in PvE because you'd have so many of them out at one time. But the Spectacular Sphere trait is now going to be swapped with the base thing that you would have. So essentially, you take this trait, it used to give Fury, and now it's going to give quickness. So if you want to support your allies with quickness, you can't just run a full DPS build and then give out quickness a little bit. You have to run Spectacular Sphere, which means you're not running the Empowering Auras trait, so you have to give up some damage to support your allies, which is a reasonable trade-off. So yeah, Catalyst is getting nerfed in terms of its ability to provide boons while going full damage, but it now, it has access to a little bit easier boon sharing when it is playing those boon sharing builds. So yeah, that's only in PvE. It's going to be giving quickness on this trait. It's a little bit weird that it's Fury in PvP, but that's what they're doing to balance it. Also, the hammer coefficients on the auto attacks are getting nerfed, and that's kind of fine because you don't really use auto attacks as an elementalist that often, but they are buffing Chilling Crack, or sorry, they're buffing Rain of Blows, which is the 2 skill in water, which I think most people weren't using that much of. So it's good that they're promoting more of the 2 skills than the auto attacks. Now we're going to go over to the Engineer. So the Engineer is getting some rifle changes. First of all, Hip Shot is being replaced. Hip Shot used to be like this piercing attack. It's now going to be Rifle Burst, which delivers a quick burst of fire that pierces still, but it follows with an explosive grenade. So it used to be just this. I'm using the Predator, so the Predator animation is happening, but it's going to essentially, have an explosive grenade when it, I'm not sure if it's at that location, pierces targets followed by an explosive grenade. So I think it's maybe at the end of the shot. So not sure exactly how that's going to work. We'll have to see, but the total damage coefficient is increased from 0.65 to 1 in PvE. So it's going to be more of a DPS option, I guess, with auto attacks. Next, you've got Net Shot is going to immobilize more in PvE for more break bar, I'm guessing. Blunderbuss is the 3 skill, which is a very wide AoE shot. It's going to be moved from the... so they've moved Net Shot to the 3rd slot, and now the Blunderbuss is being moved to the 2. I don't know why they're doing that. Maybe because they think that 2 skills should... Yeah, probably because 2 skills are probably where most damage skills are, and that makes a little bit more sense. So what they're doing with Blunderbuss is they're going to make it apply might to nearby allies, and the cooldown is going to be reduced from 9 to 6 in PvE and from 12 to 8 in PvP and World v World. The minimum power coefficient is being increased quite a bit in PvP and World v World. So that means when the minimum is like when things are further away. So you can hit a lot of targets for doing quite a bit of damage still. Now they're also changing Jump Shot to make their range, instead of being 800, which was weird because a lot of skills are like 300, 600, 900. They're making it a 900, so it's going to be a little bit further range. And they're going to make the Launch Blast an explosion, so it's going to have more synergy with explosive straight lines. And the animation is going to be updated for more bounce. The animation was always kind of weird, and 2 seconds less on the cooldown here. Then the utility Throw Mine, which was kind of, I think, only used really in like GVGs maybe, is being reduced to 2 seconds rather than 3 in World v World only. Sorry, when I said seconds, I meant the boon removal is being removed from 3 boons removed to 2. Now you have Firearms. This is the trait line that is kind of like hybrid-y. It's a hybrid trait line. And what this is changing is Hematic Focus, which gives you crit chance to bleeding foes. It's going to be 15% now, so you're going to pretty much have 5% more crit chance, and you're going to have Fury giving 5% more, so you have 10% more crit chance as a engineer after the patch if you're using firearms. And pinpoint distribution is being removed, at least the condition sharing. It's now going to give might to allies instead of the condition damage, so less unique buffs, as I said earlier, to each class. High caliber and no scope are having their ranges increased from 300 to 400, so it's a little bit easier to get these benefits of the crit chance and the fury here. And they're also going to change explosives, no aim assisted rocket. So the minimum range threshold, instead of being 450, is going to be 150, which means that it's a lot easier to hit, because it's kind of weird where you would be in melee, which is a riskier position, but you'd actually be doing less in that riskier position. So it's kind of nice that the threshold is being reduced there, but it's still kind of awkward that the threshold is like still promoting you to be at safer positioning on a skill to do more damage, but it is what it is. Then there's inventions, which is the more defensive trait line here, and that's going to give you more it's going to give you less healing on medical dispersion field, which is whenever you heal yourself, you heal nearby allies for a percentage of that, but it's going to affect the sharing that you do with like regeneration effects as well, such as Big Boomer, Backpack Regenerator, and Rectifier Signet. And it's also going to store that healing for 3 seconds and then give them out at those 3-second intervals. So I guess it's more like to spread out your healing rather than giving it all at the same time. But that's pretty much the inventions changes there. Mechanist now. It's a lot of changes to Mechanist. In PvE, the Mech Defiance bar is now going to be locked, so you can't have your mech CC'd in PvE. Still can be in PvP and World v World. The Jade Cannons trait is now going to give 25% in PvE crit chance to your mech and 10% in PvE or in PvP. So with the crit chance trait and the range trait, you're going to get a lot of crit chance on your mech now, so they're promoting like power builds, I guess. All right, so Discharge Array. That's the F2 skill when you have the Condi one. That just is like a quick attack that makes your mech have this pulsing AoE around it. That is now an instant cast, and it's going to be reducing the amount of damage that it does through confusion, because the duration is going to be pretty much halved here from 10 to 5. So it's going to be more usable but less damage, because we know that Condi mech right now is a really powerful build in PvE. Yeah, and it's being only reduced in PvE. Now, when using a mech command skill, most other mech command buttons display a cooldown. Essentially, they're making it easier because like the mech skills, as you can see, when you're using one skill, like it prevents you from using another one. So they're going to make it easier for you to like use all of your mech skills, because you can more easily see when they're going off, and you can also use a lot of them at the same time, because you're going to have instant cast skills now instead of all of them having cast times. Essentially what this means. Spark Revolver, damage increased by 10% in PvE only. I don't even know what that is. Is that like a mech attack skill that they just use passively? Probably. Then, so it's more power-oriented mech, I guess. Rocket Fist Prototype, that's the Mace 3, which is a stun. Now will be a 1-second stun, so they're buffing it from 0.5 to 1 second. However, the passive that makes your mech also do a stun when you use your mech 3 is no longer going to stun, because you've got that increased duration now on the Mace 3, but it will now use the rocket punch on all of your 3 skills. So you don't have to be a mechanist using mace 3 to get the mech to do it. You can use you can use pistol 3 as a mech and get this trait to proc, or rifle 3. There's not many choices for weapons on engineer. And it still deals Defiance bar, but I think the really only benefit of this skill is that it was a CC, but I guess it just does burning now in PvP. I guess in PvE it still does damage, but you've got the stun already on the Mace 3, so it just makes it more accessible to. You don't have to combine your max positioning with yours to get the perfect like Mace 3 stun. You just worry about your Mace 3 now. It was a little bit weird, so that's a good change. Core reactor shot. That was the F2 when your mech has the power trait. That's that ability. And essentially what that would do is your pet would your mech would shoot out this shot out. I just did it when you couldn't see what was happening, but essentially that's going to have a lowered animation. So that was a nice CC skill in PvP, but it was hard to land because it was so slow. So you'll see right here, this is the core reactor shot right here. It's kind of slow. And now that's going to be a lot easier to land because they have the skills animation. Now mech core J Dynamo has been reworked. It no longer causes your mech to have explosion synergy, which I kind of liked, but it was kind of weird how only explosions had that synergy and no other trait line did. So they removed that, and instead it reduces the cooldown of mech command skills by 20% and grants quickness after a mech command skill is used. So your mech is this, if you want your mech to be doing a lot of stuff, this is going to be the trait for you. And if you want your character to be doing stuff, then you want the J drive. And if you want to, so it's more clear what these Grandmaster skills are actually giving you, because this is like sustain for yourself. This is like your mech doing a lot more stuff. And then this is like helping your allies. So I think this is a lot better for like how the trait visibility and playstyles are more clear. So next we've got Sky Circus, which was the F3 while you have the J drive trait. This ability, which you can see here, it was like an evade and then like a drop down. It shot out projectiles if there's nearby enemies, but now it's going to shoot those projectiles out in a circular radius instead of just firing them in a forward arc. Now superconducting signet, which was the thing that did a lot of damage when enemies were near your mech with this thing, it's going to be reduced to only give 3 seconds instead of 5 seconds of confusion and vulnerability. But it will still give a lot of burning, but it was already kind of 3 seconds on the burning. So it's not changing the burning at all. Now, let's go to the Guardian. So Guardian is getting the Valor trait line changed to just one trait, which I think is a huge change, Strength in Numbers. This was a trait that gave toughness to nearby allies in combat, which was kind of weird for raids because you didn't want to take this trait because it would give toughness to allies, which would then mess with the tanking, sort of. So they've changed that. So yeah, the Strength in Numbers, it used to give toughness, but now what it's going to do in combat is it will pulse 3 seconds of protection in all game modes every 10 seconds, which is nice because not always did you really want to take any of these other traits in Valor if you're going for like a meditation build. And the protection is kind of nice with the Steadfast Courage. It's got some good synergy with that to give you a high protection uptime. And it was better synergy to have the, I think, protection for a little bit of time rather than like a little bit of toughness all the time, because yeah, the protection can pulse when you're in combat when you don't need it, but I think having the uptime with Steadfast Courage is going to be better. Though in PvP, the duration of this trait is very low. It's like 1 second or maybe 3 seconds of protection when you block an attack. So then you've got Radiance. Radiance is going to change the Amplified Wrath, which gives you increased burning duration on your passive and is going to increase all burning damage that you do. What they're reducing is the burning damage that you do. So that's a bigger nerf than just the duration of your F1. So they're reducing it from 15% to 10%, which is going to be a huge nerf to the Firebrand build, right? Because most of their damage is burning. Then they're going to change Perfect Inscriptions. It no longer gives Signet passive effects to allies when activated, which is like removing those unique buffs that specific classes can give to their party. And it's going to work more like the Mechanist trait, where it allows your Signet passives to remain after using the active, which is pretty cool for like the Signet of Courage, where you want to use that active, but then you lose all of your passive at the same time. So this is a nice trade-off where you can take this trait and keep the, passive and active at the same time. Now they're also changing Signets. Signet of Resolve is going to decrease the passive effect from 10 seconds to 5 seconds, and it removes 2 conditions instead of 1, which means, and it also doesn't do them like out of combat. So as soon as you get that first condition on you, it starts doing the passive. So it's going to increase the self-condition cleanse a lot of this. And it's 2 conditions every 5 seconds. That's actually really strong. So we'll probably see a lot more play from the Signet Resolve. And maybe the Exodia Guardian build, if you know, you know, we'll see play. Next is Signet of Mercy. That's the Res Signet. That's going to get a buff in PvE from 90 seconds to 50 second cooldown, only in PvE. Signet of Wrath going from 3 seconds to 6 seconds. That's the one that immobilizes. So it's a 6-second immob in PvE, probably for more break bar, I guess. And then Signet of Courage, which is the elite here, is going to have a 600 radius range, which is quite a nerf. That was a huge nerf there. And it's going to essentially heal for smaller amounts in 5 small channeled heal pulses. So while you're doing the thing, you don't sit there and cast the entire cast time and then all of the healing happens at the end. It's going to be like while you're casting it, it's healing the entire time. So it's going to be more instant, the healing, but it's probably going to do it less maybe. I don't know if it'll be as much healing as before, but I think usually in the situations you want to use Signet of Courage, you're not using it to like full heal someone, because if you are, they're going to be extremely low. And if you decide, oh, now's the time when I need to full heal them, they'll probably die before the cast time goes off. So I think this is going to make it a lot more usable, to be honest, which is a good change. Also, it channels protection, resolution, and stability on allies in the radius, which is only 600. And those, it does not give stability in PvP or World v World, which is good because there's too much stability already. So those are some interesting Signet changes. Now, Firebrand is going to get some changes to the Mantra of Solace, which is the heal skill. The skill now grants Aegis instead of protection and resolution in PvP in World v World only. So they're reverting that change where they made it give protection and resolution. Now it gives Aegis, but only in PvP in World v World, because in PvE the Aegis is way too strong when bosses' attacks are very slow. Now Willbender is getting only one change. They're changing the F2, which is the Flowing Resolve. This is an evade that has a 2 count recharge. They're reducing that from 2 to 1 in PvP. Now, Willbenders are really strong right now, but is that enough of a nerf? I think it's a pretty heavy nerf for sure, because when something has count recharge, the cooldown is constantly getting value pretty much always, unless you're at full max stacks of it. But yeah, reducing something's count recharge from 2 to 1 is doing more than just doubling its cooldown. So that's a really heavy nerf to the F2 skill, which is going to reduce the Willbender's survivability quite a lot. So, yeah, we'll see how that actually, those changes come out. I see like Valor buffs coming out, so maybe like you'll rely more on meditations, but those are the Guardian changes. Now for Mesmer. Mesmer is getting changes to dueling, which is the kind of like crit oriented trait line. Master Fencer, this is the trait line, or the minor, right? Where whenever you strike an enemy whose health is below the threshold, which is below 75%. So that's no longer going to be required them to be below 75%. It's just any critical hit. So it requires you to crit, which is more reliable than someone being below 75% health, but it's also going to be granting that fury to nearby allies, which is great in group content. And it's going to be an internal of 8 seconds, whereas I think it's a 5-second cooldown right now. So it's going to be a little bit of a nerf if you're hitting people below 75, but I think it's more reliable now, which is good. So that fury uptime is going to be more reliable, because you want the fury when you start hitting someone, not after you've already hit them a lot. So next is the Virtuoso. They've got Quiet Intensity, which is this trait here, which gives you extra crit chance while you have Fury. So you have 30%, but now it's going up to 35% crit chance. So that's only in PvE though. Also the F2, Bladesong Sorrow, used to give bleeding on hit, which would be like 5 bleed. No longer is going to give bleed. So that's a nerf clearly to the PvE Virtuoso build. But also I think they just want Virtuosos to be more of like a power build, I believe. So yeah, and like PvP and World v World, if you're playing a power Virtuoso, that doesn't really change much. So, and there's no buffs to this Jagged Mind trait. I think they really don't want a condition Virtuoso build to be too prominent. So let's go to the Chronomancer now. Chronomancer is going to get Seize the Moment buffed. The radius is going to increase, so it already gives quickness to allies in a 240 radius, but now it's going to be 360. And this trait is now going to make Tides of Time, which is the shield skill 5. I don't have a shield on right now, but you get the point. Shield 5 is going to apply quickness in that 360 radius for 5 seconds when cast. And that's a long duration of quickness without boon duration. So that's going to give a lot of quickness to the Chronomancer by itself, but also when in a team as well. It's going to make it a lot easier to give out that quickness, because in a lot of cases you need to shatter, right, to give out your quickness. And if your allies aren't nearby, you have to wait for them to shatter, which reduces its damage a lot. So I think this is going to increase the Chronomancer quickness option DPS as well as its boon providing. Now Lost Time is reworked and named into Stretched Time. The first pulse of a well also applies alacrity for 4 seconds to allies near the well in a radius of 360. Tides of Time now also applies alacrity. So essentially you choose the quickness trait, or you choose the alacrity trait. And this one makes your shatters quickness, and this one makes your wells alacrity. Now I think that the wells is maybe a little bit more restrictive than just shatters, so maybe an alacrity chrono might be not the best, but we'll see. Now it also makes your Tides of Time going to give alacrity instead of the quickness. Now shield Tides of Time is changing from a 40-second to 35-second cooldown. The stun enemy and ally boon components of the skill now each have separate 5 target caps. This skill no longer applies quickness and alacrity to allies the wave passes through, so you don't have to aim it anymore, but it applies swiftness for 5 seconds and 5 stacks of might for 15 seconds in a radius of 360 when cast. So depending on which trait you take, it gives alacrity or quickness, and then it'll also give swiftness and might. The trait seize the moment. Yeah, we already know. We just read that. Now they're changing wells as well. Well of action, which is normally going to give quickness on the final pulse. If you have the trait, it's going to give alacrity, but it's going to give super speed on the final pulse to allies instead of quickness now. But it'll give alacrity if you have the trait. And then Well of Recall, they're going to change that to Well of Senility. So they're changing it from being recall, like I have good memory, I'm recalling things, to I'm being senile and I can't remember anything. So it's like more, instead of helping your allies, it's hurting your enemies. So now it's going to remove 2 boons from enemy targets in the final pulse. So that's, yeah, maybe not the best, because are people going to stand in that? Probably not. But you'll probably use, yeah, you probably won't use recall that much, will you? No. You'll probably use calamity, action, and precognition, for, which I think is pretty good for support chrono build, because now you can use precognition and get alacrity to your allies using it, which is a really strong skill. So I think that's a pretty, yeah, that's pretty good. I like the change, to be honest. It makes some of the wells less powerful, but it makes all wells more powerful. So I kind of like it, because like Gravity Well is already really good, and the Heal Well is already really good, so it's buffing those. But yeah, it's making these two kind of like weaker at the same time, so it is a trade-off. So let's go to Necromancers. Necromancers are going to get some changes to the Warhorn. Wail of Doom, which is the Warhorn 4, is now going to fear for 1 second instead of 2 seconds of daze. And remember, this is unblockable, so it's an unblockable fear. Interesting with some like spite traits that can proc on fear, or soul reaping fear traits. So the Warhorn just has more synergy, I think, with the Necromancer traits and like builds, which is nice. And it's going to inflict bonus Defiance bar on Defiant enemies, so it's good in PvE. Next is Locust Swarm. The 5 skill is now going to heal nearby allies around the Necromancer based on the number of enemies hit, in addition to its previous effects. So it's more supportive for like a Heal Scourge is going to be able to heal its allies more and not rely so much on the revival of their teammates, which is inherently not the best, because when you have to revive your allies, they lose damage. So like having a Heal Scourge in your team is kind of like hurting your team, because the way you support them is by reviving them, whereas if you play another build, you prevent them from going down, so it helps them to stay up and be more useful. So this is good for making necro support builds more viable. Utilities, Corrosive Poison Cloud is going to be nerfed in PvP from 8 to 6 seconds. That's a good nerf, because this skill was really powerful and low cooldown in PvP. As you can see, it has kind of not the best animation, and it blocked projectiles, which really countered a lot of things and gave weakness. So reducing its duration is probably the best way to go about that. Now, Soul Reaping. Death Perception is being changed to give 10% crit chance regardless of whether the Necromancer is in Shroud. Right now it gives 33% crit chance only in Shroud, and the trait now increases critical damage by 15% instead of increasing ferocity while in Shroud. So at the moment, if I go in Shroud, I'm at 192, goes to 212. So that's 20% crit damage, and now it's going to 15%. So they're nerfing Death Perception to have 23% less crit chance in Shroud, but 10% more out of Shroud. And then you're going to have a 5% damage decrease. Reaper was, as I said at the TLDR, was kind of like the best build really as like a new player. So it's providing a little bit more diversity, I think, for players. But Reaper, I think, is still very good. So it is what it is. Now, Blood Magic, Blood Bank, it's the trait that converts healing into barrier, is now going to get those healing to barrier effects from like over time healing, like uh, regeneration or like signets. Like the signet heal is going to give you probably more barrier too. And it's going to be reduced to make up for the fact that more sources can give you it from 10 to 5 in PvP and 15 to 10 in PvE. And then Banshee's Wail, which is the Warhorn trait here, is going to grant a 10% bonus to outgoing healing effectiveness in addition to its previous effects. So you have to choose between having Vampiric Presence, which is a little bit more damage, or Banshee's Wail, which is going to be more healing, but also this is going to increase the effectiveness of um, your Warhorn skills, which the Warhorn skills are going to give a little bit more healing, right, with the Locust Swarm. So this is definitely going to be a little bit more useful for healing your allies than the just passive healing here, that which you can't control as much. And then in Reaper, so we've got Reaper changes. Nightfall, which is the 4 skill in the Great Sword, is going to be, the cooldown's actually going to be reduced, so they're buffing the Warhorn, the Greatsword 4. Grasping Darkness is the 5, that's the pull skill, is also being reduced. These are only in PvP and Worldly World though. Then your Soul is Mine, which is the heal skill. This was always an interesting heal because it worked out with the synergy of the build really well, but it was kind of underwhelming by itself as a skill. But now they're increasing it from 4,000 to 6,000 in PvP and Worldly World, and the base life force generation is going from 5 to 10%. So that's nice. I like that because it's going to allow more build diversity with Reaper, because everyone just uses Consume Conditions. And you're all weaklings, which is the shout that weakens and gives might, is now going to give more weakness in PvP and Worldly World, and the might is going to be 5, instead of 5 stacks, it's going to be 8 stacks. And then Chill to the Bone, which is the elite, is now going to have a 60-second cooldown, down from 75 in PvP and Worldly World. If you look at PvE, it's actually got a 90-second cooldown here, so it's like, why does it have a longer cooldown in PvE than it does in PvP and Worldly World? I don't know. Why is that? Then we've got Harbinger changes. Harbinger, the elixirs. All elixirs now use normal projectile targeting underwater. Okay, that's just underwater changes. And then Elixir of Ambition is going to have, instead of 25 stacks of might, it's going to have only 10 when you use it in PvP only. So in Worldly World roaming, Sally Harbinger is still God. But in PvP, you can trade damage maybe with them a little bit more because they don't do insane damage. Or if you're kiting them, they don't do insane damage to you while they have this up. Next is the Ranger. So Ranger is getting Spirit reworks. So spirits are no longer 10 allies. They now only affect 5. And they don't do their effect when someone hits something in the radius. They now do their effect just passively over time. So the Nature's Vengeance trait, which is nature magic, is going to, so currently it gives a 10 target ally to the boons. So spirits already gave 10, but the boons that it gave were also 10 from the trait here. And this is when you have the nature magic trait. I'm trying to read it again. What the difference here is actually, so spirits no longer apply effects when an ally in the radius strikes an enemy. Right, so that's based on the passive effect, is going to be a 3-second interval, but the trait which is also based on the spirits, is going to increase the duration of those boons by 50% and causes spirits activated skills to apply alacrity to allies in an area. So it's going to essentially, when you use your skills, right? Like if I use a spirit, well, I have this, it's going to activate it, and I got like three might there from using the frost spirit. Now it's going to, instead, they're going to change the boons that you get. So actually, I don't think any of them are changing, right? You get the same boons here. Water Spirit is regen, Sun Spirit is vigor, Storm Spirit is fury, Stone is protection, and Frost is might. So the boons aren't changing. It doesn't say anything about Nature's Vengeance, which is the elite skill, so I'm guessing that's the same. It still gives stability, but essentially you're getting alacrity when you activate the spirit, right? So they're not pulsing alacrity. You have to use the actual skill to get alacrity. So you need to keep putting your spirits on top of yourself, which you should be kind of doing already, but it's a little bit more active than you might think. And then Beast Mastery is going to get a change to the minor trait here. It's essentially, there was like a bug where some pet skills weren't getting reduced. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Marksmanship. Clarion Bond, there was a bug where you couldn't see the buff on your bar, or it was remaining when it wasn't actually there. So they just fixed a visual bug. So then Nature Magic, we just kind of went over this. But the alacrity is going to apply for 4 seconds. I'm not sure if that's before or after the 50% boon duration from spirits, but with boon duration, you're gonna have like 8 at least seconds of alacrity per spirit, and most druids take at least 4 spirits, right? So should have pretty good alacrity uptime very easily. Unlike your normal druid build, you're gonna have concentration anyways. So then they've got changes to skirmishing. So skirmishing spotter has been reworked, obviously, because that's a unique class buff to its allies. They don't want those anymore. And now it's going to give a 3-second duration of fury on a 10-second interval. So that's going to be great synergy, because really rangers don't want precision. They want fury, because a lot of things scale with fury, like Vicious Quarry. You've got marksmanship, right? You've got the trait here, Remorseless, is going to give you Remorseless opening strike when you gain fury. So I think spotter is actually going to be a pretty good option for power ranger build for like solo play, obviously not group play. But this is also kind of a nerf, if you think about it, for power rangers, right? Because they don't provide a buff to their allies anymore, and they just provide fury, which is already very easily accessible. So do they take the sword trait? Do they take the Condi trait? Probably, like they just have no option here anymore in group play. So it's a more of a solo kind of like thing now, but you still probably want Vicious Quarry, right? Like in Hunter's Tactics, those are pretty good. So maybe skirmishing is going to see more Condi play and group play. I don't know. Yeah, and then they're changing Hunter's Tactics and Vicious Quarry here to get 5% more crit chance. So actually the things that I just said that they're losing, they're gaining kind of more damage back and crit chance back. So you got actually like 30% or an extra 10% more crit chance just from being in skirmishing. So yeah, it's actually pretty good for power builds, never mind. And then in Druid is going to see Grace of the Land nerfs. So right now you can see there's 2 might per stack. It's actually 1 stack after the changes, and it's 10-second duration from like 12 or 13. So it's a nerf to Grace of the Land. They were giving a lot of like might to other classes, so I think they want not one specific build to give all the might. These are mostly PvE changes, as you can see. PvE only. Lingering Light, this is the healing kind of like Grandmaster option for druids. It used to be really good for like giving like a blind. I think it still gives that, but yeah, on your first attack, after you go into, it's kind of weird because when you go into Celestial Avatar, you only have one attack. So really natural should just say your natural convergence blind, but I guess you could have other attacks. Um, let's see here. So Lingering Light now provides passive astral force generation while not in Celestial Avatar form, which is really nice because not always are you healing people to get astral force. So, for example, like you're in a World v World roaming group, and I think you have to be in combat to get that passive. Well, maybe not, but yeah, maybe you don't need to be in combat. So you're just gaining passive astral force from Lingering Light, and what that means is you can like do a really quick burst engagement and then disengage, and then have your astral force up for the next fight. Whereas if you're like in a raid or something, you would have all that astral force by just healing people. So it wasn't really an issue in raids, but it was more an issue in like situations where players don't need healing, so you can't gain healing to heal them more. So this just makes it more reliable to heal them. And they're also getting a little bit more outgoing healing from this trait as well. Natural Mender, which is this, gives a 2% increase healing of like the stack of buff whenever you heal allies. Now in PvP, that was a 1% stack of extra outgoing healing. So now in PvP and World versus World, it's going to be 1.5. So it's a little bit closer to the PvE coefficients there. Glyph of Unity, which is this was the thing that tethered you, yeah. So they're changing the Celestial Avatar version of it is going to have a 0.5 second interval. What this does is essentially when you're in Shroud, whenever you heal yourself, it will heal allies that you're tethered to. So now there's a lower interval on that, and healing can now be triggered by regeneration or other healing over time effects. And I believe that the healing that it did to allies when you healed yourself was like a static duration. So the regeneration effects aren't going to like give them a less healing. It's just always going to be the same amount. So the more you can heal, the more you should. And those regen effects are going to make sure that the Glyph of Unity is getting its max value. So a buff there. Ancestral Grace, which is the Staff 3, is going to have pretty much doubled its coefficient in PvP and World v World. So better healing options in those game modes, which is nice. Then you've got a map change here. Soul Beast, Leader of the Pack. In PvE, the stance duration is going to be changed to basically what the PvP one was. So that's the one that when you use a stance, you share it to allies. It's going to be the same as the PvP one, which is 120, which is quite a nerf. Yeah, the value, instead of being 50%, it's 20%. So it's quite a nerf there. And in PvE, they're also reducing the recharge from 80 to 60, which is a buff, but it's also going to reduce the duration from 8 to 6, which is a nerf. And making it's matching the PvP values. In PvE, it's going to have a damage coefficient per strike increased from 0.6 to 0.9, but the interval is going to be increased to 1. So the interval used to be 0.25, so like 1/4 of a second. Now they're quadrupling that. So they buffed it by not even double, but they quadrupled how often you can hit it. So it's a huge nerf to One Wolf Pack, which is like one of the most overpowered skills, to be honest. It increases your burst in a lot of situations. A lot of like speed clears are actually being done with One Wolf Pack. It's just making bosses instantly die. So they're normalizing it, but also nerfing it because they're making it useful more often, but not as bursty. So yeah, they're just lowering the top and increasing the bottom essentially, which is a common thing that you're going to be seeing here. Next is Untamed. Only 2 changes. The hammer skills, so the heavy smash here, the damage coefficient is being increased by slight amount in PvE only, and the wild swing is being increased from 1 to 1.5, which is actually quite a bit of a buff there. So that's, I mean, I think that's one of your like most damaging skills. So they're increasing that a lot. And as you can see, it's already pretty high for me here. So that is, in PvE, Untamed is pretty not so good, but it's also not so good in PvP and World v World, so it's not really seeing many changes there either. So if you guys know the Unicorn Untamed build for PvP and World v World, let me know. Alright? Send me your Untamed builds right now. And then they're going to change some Ranger pet things. I think they had tooltips weren't matching, or they had the incorrect. So it's just bug fixes to pets. So, Revenant. Ancient Echo. This is the core Revenant F2. This skill now grants regeneration instead of alacrity in Centaur stance. That's kind of a nerf, but Rejuvenating Assault. That's the staff auto attack, the final hit that creates healing orbs, and instead it will heal allies around the Revenant. So you'll see this is a kind of like a recurring thing. Anything that has to do with healing orbs is being removed and just changed into just heals instantly around you. So here we've got Devastation. You can see here Assassin's Presence is going to be removed. They're not giving any unique party buffs anymore. So instead, it's now going to give Fury with a 3-second duration on a 10-second interval, which no one is really going to ever use, to be honest. So they'll be using Notoriety instead, usually, than Assassin's Presence. I mean, these are some pretty heavy nerfs, to be honest. But if you think about it, they're like power creeping the game by adding more crit chance, which is buffing power builds. But then they're nerfing the overall stats that everyone can get. So they're reducing power creep, but they're increasing the power creep of individual power builds, which, as we know, condition builds in PvE right now are kind of like the majority of things played. So it's kind of a nice change for PvE to, you know, not always just play condition everywhere. And I guess for PvP, some power builds are being buffed as well. So yeah, Assassin's Presence. I don't think anyone's going to use that anymore. Legendary Centaur Stance. So that is the Ventari one. They're going to rework this. So whenever you summon Ventari's tablet, or you use the Project Tranquility, right? So it says here, when entering Legendary Centaur Stance, which is like when you swap into Legendary Centaur Stance, and when using Project Tranquility, which is the heal skill. So whenever you do any of these actions, you will empower your tablet and make your next Legendary Centaur Stance skill be stronger. So Natural Harmony, which is the big nuke heal, that's going to heal more and will give endurance to the affected allies. Purifying Essence, which is the cleanse, is going to cleanse additional conditions when it's empowered. Protective Solace, that is the bubble here, the thing that blocks projectiles. That's going to give protection to nearby allies in the area. And then the elite skill, Energy Expulsion, is going to knock down for a longer time, which was kind of like 1.5 seconds already. So that allows a little bit more burst potential as a Ventari Revenant, because now when you want your skills to be stronger, even if the tablet is where you want it to be, you'll just press the heal skill and move it like slightly, and that'll improve the next skill. And also just in general, it allows the Ventari skills to be a little bit more impactful, because as it is in like PvP situations, it's way too slow for you to actually like prevent someone from dying. So these are really welcome buffs to different support playstyles. Now, Project Tranquility will now activate instantly. I thought it already activated instantly. I'm not sure exactly what that's changing, but the base healing is being increased in PvE only, slightly. Ventari's Will is... Okay, so hold on. So actually, I was wrong earlier. Project Tranquility is when you do this. When you summon the Ventari's tablet after using the elite. So you have to use your elite skill, and then you have to create the thing with Ventari's Will. Or sorry, with Project Tranquility. Ventari's Will... Alright, so essentially what we're understanding here is now that there's no cast time when you want to create this. So you can see I did like an arm motion. That's now instant. So Project Tranquility is when you create the tablet out of the energy expulsion, having removed it, or when you swap into Centaur Stance. So it's not as strong as I thought it was, to be honest. But Ventari's Will now, this skill has no energy cost. So, okay, that's pretty good. It used to be 5. And the cooldown has been reduced to 0.25 seconds instead of 3. So you can pretty much move it always, which is really good. That allows you more control over who you're healing. And the skill no longer heals allies, which is a good trade-off because now you can use your big burst skills when you need them on who you need them rather than just giving passive heals over time. So Natural Harmony, this is the... Yeah, so if you weren't seeing what I was talking about, Ventari's Will is what happened. Yeah, I'm going to get attacked here. So, let's put the tablet on myself. Natural Harmony, that's the skill here. Increase the heal attribute from 2.25 to 2.75 in PvE only, so that's a huge heal. Increase the heal attribute scaling from 1.25 to 1.75 in PvP and World War as well. That's really high. Energy Expulsion, that is the elite. It no longer creates healing fragments, right? There's no more healing bubbles or things you have to pick up from the ground. And it no longer consumes all energy when used. The cost has now been increased from 10 to 35. So now it's just a 35 cost every time. And it now knocks down enemies that it strikes instead of knocking them back. So there's no decap play with it, which is nice. We don't like decap builds in PvP, so it's good. Now, Legendary Demon Stance. Let's see that. So that Banish Enchantment is the skill that gives like a long range like Boon Rip. Gives like 3 Boon Rip. And this is really strong. So in World versus World, this is getting nerfed to be a 30-second or a 30 energy cost instead of a 20 energy cost. And this was really strong in I think like GVGs maybe. So it's getting nerfed. It's also like it's an AoE as well. Like it pierces and it's unblockable and it removes 3 boons. So it's extremely powerful. Salvation. So the Salvation trait line, you're essentially going to see a lot of the traits that give healing orbs. They're just removed. And instead they're going to heal allies. Like Healer's Gift is going to heal. Instead of creating an orb, it's going to just heal when you dodge. Blinding Truths is... It had an internal cooldown in PvP because people were abusing that with Ventari builds to like decap and have perma blind by just spamming their heal skill. That now has a internal of 3 seconds in PvE and World v World, and it always had a 10-second in PvP. Vital Blessing, that's going to be removed. Invoking Harmony has been moved to the slot, so this is going here and this is going away. And Tranquil Balance, so Tranquil Balance is... Okay, it's this one. It's the one that gives you just healing increase. This trait has also been removed and replaced with eluding. Okay, that's just a new skill. Eluding nullification. This removes a condition from nearby allies at the end of the player's dodge roll. So it's just like a condition cleanse option when you dodge. Words of Censure is no longer going to create healing when you do those effects. It's just going to, it's not an orb, it just does a healing effect around you. Fortified Blessing. Okay, so this is a new trait. Fortified Blessing is going to fill this slot because this trait is going here. And Fortified Blessing will grant protection when you remove a condition from an ally. And the internal is 0.25 seconds. Then you've got Serene Rejuvenation, which is the minor trait here. Increased outgoing healing bonus from 15 to 20. So you're getting more healing in PvE and PvP. And it's no longer going to give alacrity to nearby allies when you use the Ventari skill here, when you use Natural Harmony. However, this trait will increase the effects of your Ventari skills. So essentially what we've got here is when you use Project Tranquility, right? So we use that, and then we don't have our thing out anymore. So we can use this to empower our next Ventari tablet skill, and that will make, for example, this skill give protection, this skill give more cleansing, and this skill give more healing and endurance, and this one knock down further. However, when you have the trait line for salvation, so you can have no salvation, but you can still have those effects on the Ventari tablet. But when you also have salvation, there's going to be more effects on all of these skills just baseline without having the empowerment. So this skill is going to have vigor. This skill is going to have regeneration. This one is going to have swiftness. Yeah, swiftness. And energy expulsion is going to have resistance. So there's a lot of passive effects being toppled onto the Ventari tablet, which essentially if you're just running Salvation and Ventari, you just get them all. Now, Generous Abundance, that's this. There's no more healing orbs, so that's just going to heal. And healing is increased and occurs around Ventari's tablet when using legendary stance skills. So essentially, when you use any kind of legend skill, you're going to heal nearby allies. But when you're in Ventari stance, it's going to heal further, but do it around the tablet instead. So this is pretty much going to be the healer trait, which it wasn't before. It was more so this trait. But now this trait is being removed and replaced with Invigorating Dismissal, which is it's a new trait. And it grants endurance when the Revenant removes a condition from an ally. So this is like the condition removing line now. And this is like the healing line, and this is like the selfish kind of like sustain line. So it's making the trait lines feel a little bit more like thematic along the lines there. Now, Retribution. This trait, Planar Protection, instead of a 20-second cooldown in PvP, it's going to be a 30-second cooldown. So it gives projectile reflect and a pulsing weakness around you when you have this. It's kind of a hard to see animation too, but yeah, very subtle. And that's pretty much it for the core rev. Now we've got Herald. Herald is going to have some buffs as well. So Forceful Persistence, that's this trait. When you have an upkeep, it's going to give you more damage per upkeep. So Power Heralds are going to get more damage. Usually I think that's in PvE, but yeah, this is only in PvE that this change is being made. Draconic Echo, though, which is what most PvP builds use, is now going to grant 1.5 seconds of quickness to allies when the Revenant uses a consume skill. And that's in addition to the already existing Draconic Echo effects. So when you're a herald, a consume skill is any of your facet actives. So use the passive, and then you use the active, like even your F2 is an active, and you'll get quickness from doing that, and you'll also get the passive effects of that whatever thing still. You know, it's kind of funny though. The true nature facet of nature thing is a passive unique group buff. But is it actually unique? Well, let's see. Grants allies lifesteal. I mean, that's they didn't remove vampiric presence as well from Necros, so there are still some unique things in the game, but they're kind of low in effect, right? Like you can give boon duration. I guess that's kind of not really needed. Maybe I don't know. It is very powerful to have over the cap of boon duration though, so maybe this could be very powerful after the balance patch. The Facet of Nature Dwarf, that's going to reduce incoming damage to allies. That's a unique buff. The Demon one isn't unique, and then the Centaur one isn't unique because they're just healing, right, and removing conditions. But yeah, I think the issue is when you stack these unique buffs on top of allies, you know, you can become way more power crept. So I don't know if they want to change these or not, but maybe you know, Herald can be very powerful with these unique buffs, and of course the ability to give quickness on like a boon sharing build. But we will see. So the elemental blast, that's the thing that pulses 3 attacks. It's going to have a 15-second cooldown instead of a 10-second cooldown, and it's going to get more damage and more duration on the conditions it does, and that's only for PvE. And the same thing with bursts of strength. They're going to increase the cooldown in PvE only, and the damage is going to be a little bit higher. So for like a quickness build, you have to probably use all of your facets and activate them so that you can get that permanent quickness. Now, lastly is Vindicator. Vindicator is extremely overpowered in PvP right now, so it's getting some nerfs. Energy Meld, which is the F2, which gives you half of your endurance, is getting an increased cooldown from 20 to 30, which isn't really that big of a nerf, to be honest. And Balance in Discord, which is a heal whenever you swap stances, is only getting reduced by 300. And you can also, when you're in Alliance stance, you can use the swap between Kurzik and Luxon as another way to gain balance in Discord, which is going to heal you further. So reducing this is kind of reducing the Alliance stance quite a bit, the sustain that you get from that. But just Vindicator in general is going to get a lot less healing. But I think you pretty much get permanent regen, which is really good anyways. I think the sustain is still really there, and in PvP, Vindicator is still going to be extremely powerful to the extent that it is right now. But I'm going to go to Thief. The Thief changes are going to change some utilities. Seal Area, this is the trap or the preparation that caused a bubble to appear that prevented enemies from going in and out of it, and would also block projectiles from entering that. So Seal Area is getting reduced in its duration that it lasts. So you put it down and then you put out this big bubble, and that lasts for quite some time. So they're reducing that to 5 seconds. Hide in Shadows, Blinding Powder, and Shadow Refuge are being reduced in cooldown. Now I know what you're thinking. That's a Shadow Arts buff. But let's look at the Shadow Arts traits to actually understand what's going on here. So Shadow Arts, they are changing Concealing Restoration. So that's this trait. When you use a heal skill, they're going to give you stealth, but no longer does it do that. They're replacing that trait with Merciful Ambush, which is whenever you start reviving an ally, they gain stealth, and you heal allies when you give them stealth. So that's now a passive to Shadow Arts. Also, what they're doing with a lot of traits is they're making it so rather than while you're in stealth, you're gaining an effect, it's when you enter and leave stealth. So you get an extra benefit to using these things by going in and out of stealth quickly because you've got the reveal duration, right? So the more that you stay in stealth, the less that you can get the benefit of these things. So the faster you reveal, the sooner you can go back in stealth and get the benefit. So I really like this, and I've been asking this for a while, is to make these Shadow Arts traits trigger on entering or exiting stealth. So this is really good because it promotes less of a, just hide in stealth gameplay and more of an active interact with people by revealing yourself. So now the passive here, the minor, is going to give healing to nearby allies when giving them. Sorry, this trait has been moved to the adept minor and now heals when entering or exiting stealth instead of applying a pulse heal upon entering stealth. So when you stealth your allies, it will give them that heal. Shielding Restoration is going to replace Merciful Ambush, and this trait fills the slot, right? And it grants barrier to nearby allies after using a healing skill. Healing skills are pretty not accessible, so I don't think that that's going to be that strong, but it is what it is. Shadow's Embrace. This is the Condi Cleanse while staying in stealth. Instead, it's going to remove a damaging condition when entering or exiting stealth instead of at every interval. So it's going to also apply to allies as well that use stealth. So it's going to be, as I said, more interactive because you don't just stay in stealth and get all that sustain. If you have a lot of conditions on you and you go into stealth, instead of just staying in stealth, you're actually promoted to leave stealth, which gives you more interactivity with the enemy and allows them to keep pressuring you. So this is a really good change. Now that makes this trait very good for certain builds because some builds don't stay in stealth very long, and those are the kind of builds that we want to promote. So I think these are good changes. Hidden Thief is the trait that gives you reduced recharge on deception skills and gives you stealth when you steal. Instead, stealing will now inflict blindness, and stealth attacks will inflict weakness. There's no more stealth there. So you blind when you steal, and that's kind of good with the Cloaked in Shadow trait. And you give weakness, which is kind of good with Daredevil builds still. Now, we just showed that the Hide in Shadows is going to have a lower cooldown, but since you don't have access to the reduced recharge on deceptions, this doesn't need that anymore. So it's kind of like a buff and a nerf to Shadow Arts, but it's pretty much at the same spot now because you assume that you would take Hidden Thief, but actually what this means is you just don't take Hidden Thief anymore and you just take Shadow's Embrace, and now you have more Condi Cleanse on Shadow Arts. So it is kind of like a buff to Shadow Arts in a way, but Shadow Arts in general has been made more interactive, which is good. This is the kind of Shadow Arts we want to be playing around and playing as. Now, Meld with Shadows. This is the trait that gives you longer duration on stealth and movement speed in stealth. This trait has been reworked. Players now gain super speed when entering or exiting stealth. No more stealth duration at all, period. So pretty good. As a Deadeye, if you want stealth duration, you don't get it. So you only get 1 second of stealth when you dodge as a Deadeye. So, yeah. It's pretty good. There's a lot less stealth duration for Shadow Arts play. Now, Leeching Venoms is going to, instead of giving you Venom over time, it's going to give you Venom when entering and exiting stealth. So, more of the stuff that we are looking for here. Flickering Shadows. This used to give you 33% damage reduction while you're revealed. Instead, it's going to be replaced by Cloaked in Shadows. So this is going here. And Flickering Shadows is now going to be essentially replaced with Cover of Shadow and going to go here, and it's going to grant protection when entering or exiting stealth. And it also applies to nearby allies. So instead of when you exit stealth, when you get revealed, it's going to give you it when you enter and exit, which is kind of like pretty good. That's a lot of protection if you're going in and out of stealth very often. And it's sort of like the same effect because protection is damage reduction of 33%, right? So that's going here, and it's competing with Shadow Rejuvenation, which was the big offender of perma-stealth builds, is no longer going to grant healing or initiative while in stealth, and instead grants initiative when entering or exiting stealth. So, that could actually be a buff, to be honest. I mean, it's obviously going to promote more more interactive gameplay, which is obviously better, but that might even be a buff, right? Because the initiative was already kind of like a 3-second thing. So we'll see. It's only one initiative, but that could be pretty good. And then Rending Shade is going to increase the boons stolen from 1 to 2 in PvP and World vs. World, which is where it already is in PvE. So I think they nerfed that, and now it's back to where it was. And then Crit Strikes. Crit Strikes has a buff to Keen Observer, which is the thing that gave you 10% crit chance when you're above 90% health. Now it's 15% in PvE only. Unrelenting Strikes is now going to grant you Fury on any critical hit, so it doesn't require a threshold of health, and it gives 4 seconds of Fury to nearby allies with a range of 360, and the internal is now 8 seconds, so it's going to give you more Fury uptime, more reliable Fury uptime, and that's good because often you don't want to rely on no quarter all the time to have Fury, right? Because how do you get Fury to get more Fury? So yeah, this is a pretty good change for even with builds that you don't want to use no quarter on. Maybe you want to use these two. So Trickery is going to give 5 might in PvE only on Thrill of the Crime when you steal. Not that big of a change. And Spectre, Traversing Dusk, is going to reduce the base Shadow Force gain from 5 to 3% in PvP only. And yeah, that's a pretty good nerf because the sustain on Spectre was a little bit too high. And now to get that life force generation, you're going to need to get the healing on allies by porting your allies and getting life force from playing with your team rather than just playing selfishly. So it's nerfing the roamer build a little bit and not as much the sort of like support Spectre playstyles, which I think is kind of like the playstyle you should really be going into if you're a Spectre, right? So lastly is Warrior. So Warriors are getting a change to the charge skill. That's the Warhorn 4. It's no longer going to give a unique buff. Instead, they're going to get 2 seconds of quickness to allies that it affects, and the increased cooldown from 15 to 20 seconds, as well as the swiftness duration increase from 15 to 20. So it makes sense, right? You want to remove all of your team's movement inhibiting conditions and then give them quickness so that they can go into battle, right? It makes more sense. And it also works probably better for the new quickness playstyle that they're trying to give us with banners. So, banners no longer provide attribute boosts. Instead, quickness is granted to allies in the area when the warrior uses the banner skill, and then the banner will continue to pulse boons to nearby allies for the remainder of its duration. Each banner provides a different boon. So Banner of Defense is Resistance. Banner of Discipline, Fury. Banner of Strength, Might. Banner of Tactics, Regen. Resistance is actually pretty strong, and if you think about it, the defense trait line, if you use Banner of Defense, actually no, you don't get Resolution, you get Resistance. So yeah, when you have Resolution, you get damage reduction here. So maybe it would have been better to have Resolution. I don't know. But it isn't what I thought it would be. So they're going to make it so that picking up a banner no longer reduces the recharge of the skill. Instead, they can be carried around and dropped to reposition them. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but maybe it has to do with like F abilities, or maybe like when you pick up a banner, right? Like you pick it up and then like you have the skill usable, but you technically have it on you. So I'm not sure. Maybe that's how it works. Yeah. And they will continue, pulsing, and the delay before you can pick up a drop banner has been increased from 1 second to 3 seconds. So essentially you can throw all your banners down and then pick up one that you didn't want to put down or something. And all banners except Battle Standard will have their recharge reduced to 60 seconds, and Battle Standard will have a 2-minute cooldown instead of a 3-minute cooldown. Reduced base duration of pulsing boons. Okay, so it's going to give Might, Fury, and Swiftness for 1 second, or 5 seconds with the Might. And then double standards, which is the discipline trait here. Instead of increasing the effect by 50% of the stat boosts, it's going to increase the boons by 50%. So that's a pretty heavy nerf to warriors, because if they want to go discipline, which they kind of do for Axe Mastery, right? They give the banners, but the banners also give them quite a bit of a boost. So like, what are they going to do? If they're a DPS build, they're not going to take the banner build, or the banner thing, Destruction of the Empowered, Brawler's Recovery. So they don't really have a trait there that gives them damage anymore. So yeah, I feel like if the idea is to remove the need for banners and then just provide no other option than banners, is that really removing the banner slave kind of my mentality? I don't know. But longbow is getting buffs as well. Scorched Earth, the longbow berserker skill, is going to be reduced in power coefficient in World v World only. I'm guessing that was overperforming. Fan of Fire is getting increased power coefficient in PvP and World v World. I thought that was more of a Condi skill. And Arcing Arrow is getting 2 ammunition off of 1 in PvP and World v World, which is a pretty big buff. That's a strong hitting but slow moving power skill. So they're trying to make longbow more of a power thing. And then Pin Down is getting a 20-second cooldown instead of 25 in PvP and World v World. Then the utilities. So Frenzy is getting a 40-second cooldown instead of 45. I still think that's pretty long of a cooldown, but quite a bit of quickness and might for a stun break as well. And then elite skills, Signet of Rage, I think had it didn't have a skill fact for combat only, so it is only in combat. And then in arms, so arms trait line, the Furious Burst trait is now going to increase your crit chance when you have Fury by 5%. In tactics, you're going to have a increase on the healing coefficients from Vigorous Shout. So when you use a shout that's healing, it's going to heal you a little bit and your allies a little bit more. And only in PvP and World v World are they getting increased. So we're going to see a little bit more support options here. And then we've got Spellbreaker. So Spellbreaker is getting increased damage on the power coefficients on the Breaching Strike. That's the Dagger F1. Same thing on the Dagger 2 or a Slicer. Bladestorm, that's the Dagger 5. So dagger skills are getting buffed. And then Featherfoot Grace, which is the resistance, was it? Yeah, the resistance and super speed stun break is getting reduced to 35 seconds in PvP. We're in PvE right now, so it says 30. Then Bladesworn. Bladesworn has a few changes here, actually. Electric Fence, which is the skill. A lot of the Bladesworn utilities are just not that good. This one was just like an immobilize for 1.5 seconds when they pass through a fence. So that was not very good. But now what they're doing is merging Electric Fence and Bulletproof Barrier, so that now Electric Fence has a projectile block on it. Bulletproof Barrier is now being removed and replaced by Overcharge Cartridges. And this will make your next 5 explosion attacks deal 15% more damage. And remember, your Dragon Slash is an explosion. So that skill already does a lot of damage, but now it can do 15% more. And using the skill, again, while you have it charged, will detonate the charges, which will remove those charges and then cause an explosion in front of you that launches enemies. So I guess that's like if you don't want the damage, you can get CC, and the radius of that skill scales based on the number of charges consumed. So I guess it's like a risk reward decision thing, which can be pretty cool. I mean, like Dragon Spike Mine. This was the thing that evaded you backwards and put your dragon trigger off cooldown. So now there's going to be less of an animation on that, because it's kind of weird. Like you want to use it aggressively, but you put yourself out of position to actually use your Dragon Slash. So they've reduced the distance and the animation, and they make the mine at the initial location rather than at the midway point, and it explodes even if it's not triggered after 3 seconds, and the skill will now count as an explosion, and its damage is increased by 250% in PvE only. So essentially what we're looking at is like maybe you'll use the cartridges skill here and then use Dragon Slash, and then you use Dragon Spike Mine, and that will also be an explosion, which is increased by 15%. And then you use another Dragon Slash for another 15% increased damage on your cartridge, on your Dragon Slash, for like a huge burst there. That could be what they're trying to give you instead of like having this like discipline thing. They're giving you some damage here through the play rather than just through passives, I guess. Now, Dragon Slash Reach, which is the 3 skill in your Dragon Trigger, the projectile, is going to be a little bit larger, so it's going to have better accuracy on moving targets. And the projectile is now unblockable, so you don't need Unyielding Dragon to make it unblockable. So it's promoting more, I guess, other choices in the traits here. Tactical Reload, which is the elite skill, is going to reload. It's going to still do whatever it did before, but it's now going to cause the next Dragon Trigger to gain charges more quickly. So when you go for your Dragon Slash right after a Tactical Reload, you can do a really heavy burst without having so much of a cast time to it. And then Daring Dragon, which is the one that makes your burst skills able to be used like multiple Dragon Slashes. No one really uses this, but it's a really fun trait. It now allows you to have the Tactical Reload, which makes you charge faster on all of the Dragon Slashes within that single Dragon Trigger that you use. So I'm guessing that this is going to allow like builds where you have a ton of like flow generation from like Signet Fury and stuff like that, and then you can unload a massive amount of your flow into like Dragon Slashes very quickly, or maybe not, who knows. And then Lush Forest had a bug that was fixed, and Tactics is going to be removing the Empower Allies because that's a unique buff, and it's going to give Might on a 10-second interval for 10-second duration for 5 stacks. And then Martial Cadence, which is this trait, which I thought was always pretty cool, but maybe never really had an actual application to it, is no longer going to reduce it's no longer have that effect. It now instead causes soldiers focus, which is the passive here. Whenever you use a burst skill every like 10 seconds, you'll give Might to your allies, and you can heal them if you have the trait here that heals them, but also it will make soldiers focus grant 3 seconds of quickness to your allies. So for like a support build, I guess you'd be giving quickness by using your burst skills and banners. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. That's the entire patch notes. There might be a little bit more patch notes that haven't been released yet, but we'll see when the patch happens. That's probably going to be the majority of it, though. It seems like a mainly PvE patch. PvP didn't get touched too much, which is kind of disappointing, but it is what it is. And if you like this content, then like the video, subscribe for more, Comment down below. Do you like this patch? Do you think there could be something done better? Or is there something that I'm not seeing here, like ramifications of a change that is actually larger than I made it out to be? Let me know in the comments. And of course, if you want to support me further, don't forget to check out the links and potentially become a patron, which I would greatly appreciate. And for those of you who do support me, thank you. And I will see you all next time.